Hey everybody, this is Dave Dugdale, learningvideo.com. Thank you so much for purchasing this course. You're going to learn a ton over the next few hours, from white balance, exposure, picture profiles, a lot of different things. There's going to be a lot of tests that you won't have to run, which will save you days, if not weeks, of testing. All right, you should have no buyer's remorse after buying this camera. This thing is packed with features, just unbelievable. From the 4K, from the steady shot, the in-body image stabilization on the sensor, to the 42 megapixels if you're a stills photographer, to the advanced autofocus. This is a fantastic camera. All right, this is a beginner level course with the exception of one chapter, and that's an advanced topic on S-Log. If you don't know what S-Log is, that's okay. You can just skip the chapter entirely. I'm going to show you how to use the camera and get the most out of it, but my thought is I'm going to make everything at a very basic beginner level. Watch the whole entire course if you're a beginner, except for that one chapter. Come back after 6 months, maybe a year. Perhaps you're looking to get more out of the sensor, more dynamic range, and you want to know what S-Log is. Come back and rewatch that chapter. It'll make a lot more sense after you've used the camera for a while. But the rest of the course will be very basic. It's perfect for somebody, let's say, that's a photographer and you're shooting on this camera for a few months now and you want to now start shooting video. Or it's perfect for somebody that's brand new to cameras altogether. I'm going to try to keep this at a very basic level. I'm going to be covering everything in the manual as it pertains to video. Now this is going to save you hours of time just reading the darn manual. Now I will tell you, you're like looking at it, it's like, well, it's not that big. I could read this in probably less than an hour. Well, the thing is, this is not all of it. There's a whole bunch more online, and I'll put a link down below of these videos that are right here on the website. There's going to be a link down below where you can actually get access to the full manual if you have any further questions beyond what I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be covering some photography related items, so there's going to be some crossover. I'm not going to be covering all of them, only the ones that really pertain to time lapses, because time lapses can be made into videos. All right, judging from my past courses, this course is going to be about 5, maybe 6 hours long. The chapter on S-Log is probably going to be an hour long, judging by the outline and all the examples I've already shot. So I don't want this course to go to like 11 hours because I love taking courses online myself, and I took one that was about 11 hours and it just felt too long. So what I'm trying to do is cram as much stuff as I can in as 5 or 6 hours as I can. So that's kind of the sweet spot. So there's going to be some items I'm going to cover a little bit faster than normal. For instance, stuff on Wi-Fi and the store and the apps that you can get, I'm going to probably breeze through that a little bit quicker than normal so I can spend more time on some of the advanced topics like S-Log. All right, really quickly, I want to say there's a few things I'm not going to cover in this course. One of them would be like accessories, like how to operate a 3-axis gimbal. That could be a course in itself that's 4 or 5 hours long because just to balance the darn thing is very complicated. I'm not going to teach you how to tell a story, do a wedding video, a documentary, a corporate video, any of that type of stuff. I'm basically going to teach you how to use the camera, get the most out of it. All right, so we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Real quick, I want to show you what's in the box. Obviously, the body's in the box. The lens is not. There's really no kit lens, I believe, that you can buy with this camera. You buy with the body only. One thing to say on this particular camera, which is good, this is a world camera, so everybody that's watching this, no matter what country they're in, should have the exact same camera. It shoots NTSC as well as PAL, and if you don't know what that is, we'll be getting to that later. So here's the camera body. All right, first up is all the paperwork that comes with the camera. There's manuals in different languages. There's the lens selection, which we're going to talk more about lenses later. But basically all I wanted to reiterate is if you can't find something in the manual, use the link below. Do a search for the item and you'll find it much faster that way. All right, the camera strap that comes with it, I don't use. I'll just really briefly talk about what I do use. I actually take these little, I don't know what you call these little tiny things. I actually take them off the camera that attach to the camera strap. And I use a combination of different things. For instance, this is a spider kind of holster. You put a belt through it and then you can attach your camera like with 35 mil, it's very small, lightweight. As soon as you get like a 7200 lens on there, this doesn't work too well. And when I am carrying around a larger camera, I'll usually use an R strap, which goes across the side, and for me it's just a lot easier to use than the camera strap that it's supplied with. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to be shooting different things, so how you kit your camera out, you put it in cage or however you do it, everybody's going to be differently. But for me, the type of shooting that I do, it's either on a tripod, monopod, a gimbal, or, and if I'm carrying it around like this, it's either on my belt or it's on a strap like the R strap. All right, this is your USB cable. Now, if you're transferring files from your camera to your computer, I would advise not using this. And the reason being is the camera, unfortunately, is a USB 2 device. I don't know why it's not USB 3. So the speed can be quite different. So let me give you an example. This particular card is very fast. In fact, I've run speed tests on it. We're going to talk about cards here in a minute. But I actually wrote, I don't even know if you can read it, it's faded out over the years. This one can read at 91 megabytes per second. This cable, the best it could do is about 30. So this card is 3 times faster. So what does that mean? Let's say you've come home from a corporate shoot and you really want to get editing right away. You have to turn things around fast, whatever you're doing. Well, if you fill up or somewhat fill up your 64 gig card or however big your card is, let's say it takes 15 minutes to transfer using this card off a card reader, which is about right. It can take about 15 minutes sometimes. Now, if you use this cable, it would take you 45 minutes because it's 3 times slower. So basically, you've lost a half hour of editing. So I would, in terms of doing, transferring files, I would advise not using this cable. So we got this adapter here. Now this cable can also be used for updating your firmware. So that's what I've definitely used it for in the past. But now with the a7R2 compared to the a7S, which I also am filming with this, by the way, it would be also good for you to know what I'm actually filming this with. It's the a7S. All right, so what you can do with this is you can actually charge a camera or you can operate the camera. It won't do both at the same time. So you can plug this into the wall and you can plug this into your camera. And if you're in a studio situation, perhaps like what I'm doing right now, and you just don't want to keep changing out batteries as you're recording, you actually can power the camera with this device. Now when you connect this to the camera, you'll actually see an amber light turn on. That means it's charging. If it's flashing, that means there's an error or you're not within the temperature range. It's either too cold or too hot. And after the amber LED turns off, that means the battery is fully charged. All right, you get 2 batteries and a battery charger. These batteries will take about 2.5 hours to charge, and you only get about 1.5 hours per battery, depending on your shooting style. If you're in the Arctic and it's really cold, those numbers might go way down. I remember one time I was shooting, it was like -3 out, and I think the battery lasted maybe 20 minutes, and that was about it. So it's going to vary greatly. I will say, if you're shooting like wedding, videos, I know one individual has 2 A7Ss, and he uses 20 of these batteries. Now, the battery life on this is a bit better on the A7R2 than it is on the A7S. So maybe if you're shooting weddings, you might need 7-8 batteries to last you all day long. So they're not the world's best batteries, but they are small and they don't take up much room, so they're pretty easy to carry. All right, next up we're going to talk about the HDMI connector. If you use the HDMI connector a lot, it's possible that you could wear it out, yank it out. And I don't know on this particular model, but I know like on the Canon 5D Mark IIIs, it was connected to the actual circuit board. So sending it for repair, you pretty much have to replace the whole entire circuit board, and it's a very expensive fix. So having this protector is a good thing. So to mount it, you basically just, there's a little flap that this goes down onto, and it's not the easiest. And then you basically keep going around until you get that screw in, and then you take and you loop this through here, and then you take and you screw this in. Get it nice and snug, and now this won't pull out and this won't pull out as well. So if somebody tugs on it, the whole camera's going down, which is maybe not a good thing if it's on a tripod, but maybe it's better than ripping the HDMI out and having that sent in. All right, SD cards. So you bought this very expensive camera and you probably want to shoot in the best codec. I'm going to demonstrate codecs later, and after you watch them, you'll definitely know why you want to use the best codec. So don't go cheap on the cards. So the requirements I'm going to give you are shooting at the highest codec. If you want to get cheaper cards, you're not going to be able to shoot it. You'll get this message on the screen right now if you try to shoot with a lesser card. So The first requirement is it needs to be 64 gig to 128 gig. Now Sony says 128 gig in their manual because that's as high as they've tested it so far, but it might go higher, like 256, I don't know. But they're saying from 64 to 128. You can't get a 32, it just won't work. The next thing is you want to get SDXC, and you want to be able to get there's going to be a U on the card with the number 3 inside of it. That's the card that you want. And if you like, I'm going to put a link down below these videos to my gear page. Just click on it and you can go to the gear page and you'll actually see the cards that I currently use for the different cameras. I use SanDisk. I've tried other ones in the past that have gotten corrupt, and SanDisk cards have never been corrupt. I've never had any issues. So I would recommend them. The other ones that are a bit cheaper, I'd kind of stay away from. All right, really quickly, I just want to talk about the general care of the camera. Now, I've talked to my Sony rep, and this apparently has better seals on this camera, but what they say in the manual, and they're probably more conservative, is they say it's optimal dust and moisture resistant, but it's not splash proof or waterproof. Now, I will tell you that the A7S that I'm filming with, I've had for the past year, and I've had it in really wet snow, light drizzle, and I've got water beating up on the camera everywhere, even the lenses, and it still works today. I'm using it right now and it works fine. I haven't had any problems. But I will tell you, you don't want to be like dunking this underwater. And I think the general rule of thumb, everybody that I've talked to, from Canon to other people that have talked about these type of cameras, is if you can't stand the rain yourself, then your camera probably can't either. So if it's an utter downpour, probably not a good idea to have your camera out. But if it's kind of a light drizzle, like a mist or something like that, you're probably fine. But judging from what the manual says, it's not splash resistant or any of that stuff. So you might want to try to keep it as dry as you can. I want to talk about cleaning the screen back here really quickly, because the only reason I'm bringing this up is because my A7S has an issue. And I read in the manual somewhere, I remember on the A7S manual, that they didn't want you to press on the screen too hard with your cloth or whatever you were using to clean it off with. Because I'll show you some B-roll of what my screen looks like on the A7S, and you can see it's got a whole bunch of weird stuff going on around the edges. It looks fine when I turn the monitor on, but this screen on the A7R2 looks a bit different, so hopefully maybe they've solved that issue. But when you're cleaning it, all I'm going to say is maybe don't push too hard into the screen while you're cleaning it, because maybe that's what caused it on mine. I'm not too sure. All right, if you're coming from a Canon background like I did, 5D Mark III, you had a mirror in front of your sensor, and that mirror kind of helped protect it and keep it clean. And a lot of times I wouldn't even turn the camera off, and I would change the lens. Like with this camera, if you change the lens, what you'll notice is there's no mirror box, obviously, and you've got the sensor right there. And you shouldn't do what I'm doing right now, which is exposing it to dust falling down onto the sensor. Don't worry, I'll blow this off later after I'm done demonstrating this. Since we don't have a mirror box there to help protect it, what happens is there can be still a little bit of charge left on your sensor and could attract dust more easily. And I have noticed since my Canon days, I am definitely cleaning the sensor a lot more on a mirrorless compared to a DSLR. All right, we're gonna record our first video. So if you haven't done so, you've probably already done this, but mount your lens. White dot goes to the white dot. Go ahead and rotate until it clicks. SD card, go ahead and put that SD card. It's keyed, so it can only go one way. If it doesn't go down, just reverse it and it'll go in the other way. And the battery's keyed, it only goes in one way as well. Go ahead and put that in. And then turn it on and hit the record button on the side and go out and record something. And then you're just like, wait a minute, Dave, that's way too easy. And the reason I'm saying this is depending on if you have a brand new camera and you haven't done anything to it, go out and do this exercise. I basically want you to go outside, shoot some stuff, go inside where it's dark, shoot some stuff. I also want you to go from inside to outside and see what happens. Because what happens is, if you haven't touched anything on the camera, this is brand new, you're going to be on auto everything, autofocus, auto exposure, auto ISO. Everything is going to happen automatically. And this is something that I'm going to tell you not to do later, but I want you to go out and experience it. And I understand a lot of people are going to consume this course in a lot of different ways. Some people are just going to watch the whole thing. They're not going to actually have the camera in front of them and change stuff. But as we go through, we're going to start off with a clean slate, and we're going to start building up the camera in terms of all the different settings. And there's going to be a lot of custom settings, and I'll explain why. But what I want you to do first, if you wanted to go through the exercise, is just do, like I said, go outside, go inside where it's dark, and make a transition from outside to inside. And what I want you to do is bring it into your computer, take a look at the footage, and see the noise, see what's happening with the autofocus, see a lot of different things, because we're going to talk about all that stuff later. And I understand if you don't want to go through this exercise and you already kind of know what the results are going to be, that's totally fine too. So that's pretty much it for this section. All right, next up, I'm going to give you a tour around the camera, and we're actually going to customize some of the buttons. If you want to follow along with me and how I've got my camera set up, you can definitely do this. But if you do, I would recommend that you update your firmware. So if you hit the menu button and then you go to version, you'll see that I'm on version 2.0. Now you might be on 1.1 because that's what I started with when I purchased the camera. Now, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but I'd rather not show you exactly how to update the firmware on this camera because of two reasons. One, any link that I give you below to the software that you have to load on your computer is probably going to be outdated in a few months when they go to the next version of firmware. And the other reason is if you don't follow the instructions exactly, there's a possibility that you could turn this very expensive $3,000 camera into a very expensive brick, and it won't do anything, and that would be a shame. So I don't want to show you exactly how to do it. In a nutshell, basically you're going to download the software, you're going to follow the directions on the screen exactly like I said. You're going to see this green bar travel across the screen. It takes about maybe 15 minutes to do. It's kind of nerve-wracking because it takes so long and the screen is blank while you're doing it. But after it's done, it'll reboot maybe once. I think it was just once, at least the time that I did it. And then you will actually go to this version here and it'll say like 2.0. So the people that want to follow along, definitely update. There's some definite advantages of updating the firmware. All right, first up is our shutter button right here. Obviously, it'll take pictures. Most other cameras like the Panasonic GH4, you can actually press the shutter button and have it begin recording. Unfortunately, for us, we can't do that. All right, next up is the power switch. Basically, it's pretty intuitive. You turn it on or you turn it off. Now, I will say one thing. When you turn it off, it doesn't kill the electricity altogether within the camera. So basically, if you're looking at maybe an app has crashed, which has definitely happened to me, you basically have to pull the battery out, put it back in. Now, I will say when you put a fresh new battery in, it'll boot up a lot slower than as if you use the same exact battery from before. Just so you're aware of that. All right, this is the location of your IR sensor. So if you use a remote control like I do, this is the RMT845. Here, I'll give you a close-up. What I like about this remote, it's really small, obviously, but it has a button at the top right here. It says time code. I actually bought this used on eBay for like, I don't know, 10 bucks. So you can reset the time code if you have a multiple camera shoot, like sometimes I do, and you want to get the time code set exactly. You can point it at two cameras at the same time and hit that timecode button, and the IR light, I guess, will go to both of them, and then boom, it'll catch on and basically sync both of the cameras up. It's like jam syncing, I guess you could say. So it's kind of nice to have. Now, I will tell you, when we go into the menu later, deep dive into the menu when we set things up, if we turn this on, this capability in the camera to be able to use this, the display, the EVF, the camera basically will not turn off or go into power savings mode. Even if you've got it set to like 2 minutes, it will not go to sleep. So I just want you to be aware of that. Also, right here in this location is where your Wi-Fi antenna is located. Like we've already demonstrated before, this is your lens release. You basically push your finger in and you lift off, and then you don't need to push it when you remount the lens. It's pretty simple. This is your AF illuminator or self-timer lamp. So this can be very useful. Let's say you're shooting in a very dark situation, you're shooting video. you could switch this over to stills mode because this doesn't work in movie mode, and you can actually grab focus on something that you can't even see in the viewfinder very well, or in the display or the monitor. You just can't see it very well. Well, you could use this, grab focus, go back to movie mode, hit record if you want to do it that way, or you can actually record in some of the stills modes. And we're going to get into that later. There's a lot of pros and cons of shooting movies in the stills modes. But for right now, I just want to let you know that you can actually use that. Now, one thing you can't do with AF Illuminator is you can't use it in continuous autofocus. All right, inside here is your sensor like we've talked about before down here, and you don't want to touch it. Don't worry, I'm not even getting close to touching it. And then right here along here are your pin contacts. These contacts are for autofocus, they're for image stabilization, power, a bunch of different things are going through these contacts right here. All right, this is your eyepiece cup and your viewfinder. I might also call this the EVF, or electronic viewfinder. If you wear glasses, and it's always kind of a pain to get these things off, but if you pinch and kind of push these out like that, it actually exposes this area. So if you wear glasses, you can take this part off. Right here is your eye sensor. So basically what that does is when you bring your eye up to the camera, the display or the monitor, the large display right here, will turn off and the EVF will turn on. And then as you pull the camera away, the opposite happens. All right, next up is your dioptric adjustment right here. So basically what you want to do, put the lens cap on so you're not looking anything in the frame, but you're basically going to have text around your frame when you look through the electronic viewfinder, and you basically just want to move that adjustment around until the text or the icons become very clear. All right, next up is the C3 button. It's a customizable button. In playback mode, we'll cover that first. So here's a picture I just took of my monitor that I'm looking at right here. If you press this C3 button, you'll see that you'll be able to zoom in on it. And you can see that I'm a bit out of focus. But it looks like I'm on focus right there where the Shogun text is. So I actually did get it in focus. What I have done is I've actually changed the customization on the C3 button. And what I like to do, and if you're following along, what I like you to do is go to the menu, second tab over where you get to see the gear icon, and then go down over to the 7th page, and then go down to where it says custom key settings. And what I've got that set to, C3 button, is called focus mode. So if I press this button, you'll see there's a whole bunch of choices that you can pick. There's a lot of different things you can set it up for. For me, I like having this button right here where my thumb can go right to it, and when I press it, I can quickly have access between manual focus, continuous focus. Actually, this mode you won't see because when we go to video mode, and we're going to talk more about, like I said before, the pros and cons of shooting in stills mode for video. But I press here, you're going to see I basically have two choices: continuous autofocus or manual focus for video. All right, right here, I'm going to talk about this area right here. This is your autofocus, manual focus, or if the lever switches down, this is your auto exposure lock. And you're going to see a little grid right here. Right now, we're going to talk about playback mode, because again, most of these buttons will do something different in playback mode versus shooting mode. So playback mode, if we press this button right here, we're going to see it toggles between the calendar view and other views. So if you want to get out of it, just hit the play button again. So you've got this type of view, smaller icons, or you can see when you shot something. And since I've just formatted the card, you only see I've got stuff for the last couple of days. So that's what it does in playback mode. And it doesn't matter if the switch is up or down, it'll do the exact same thing, as you can see here. So now in shooting mode, and to get to shooting mode, I'm just going to hit the shutter button, or it's actually gone to it already. In shooting mode, this button I've actually changed to be something different entirely. So if we go to the menu, and we go to custom key settings, and we go over to page 2, and we go to manual focus, autofocus, manual focus button, I've set this to IAF. And basically why I've gone to IAF is I like having my thumb right here, and if I press and hold right here, it'll grab focus just on the eye, and you'll actually see it just create a green box around the person's eye. I shot a bunch of senior portraits for my niece, and at 42 megapixels at f1.8 on my prime lens, and every single one of her eye shots were in focus. It wasn't like her eyelashes, it wasn't the tip of her nose, it wasn't their ear, it was actually right on her eye, the contrast of the pupil or the iris or whatever. I don't even know what the correct term is, but it was amazing. So this is more of a stills related item, but me personally, I set this button. A lot of other people will set up back button focus if you're into sports, but for me, I really like having eye AF right there. Very powerful autofocus tool. Now if we flip the switch down, I've customized this as well. So if we go back into the menu and we go to custom key settings, go to page 2, and we go down to AEL button, I've set this to zoom. All right, right here is your rear dial, and for most of the stuff that we do in video, this is going to be our shutter control. As you can see, I'm going to the 60th of a second, back down to 50th of a second. We're going to talk more about exposure later, but that's basically what this dial pretty much does. And there's a few other things. Let me show you. If you go to the menu, you can actually cursor around with the menu this way. And also, if I hit the C1 button, which we'll get to later, I can actually move around the zoom box like this, back left and right with this particular dial. All right, here is your record button for recording movies. It's a terrible spot. And let me see if I can demonstrate this for you. If I hold the camera up to my eye and I hit this button, I'm left with my thumb kind of holding out here, and rather than it wrapping around here and giving it more of a stable grip. And a lot of times when I'll start recording, I'll do this and then move my thumb around, and it creates kind of a camera shake. And then when I go to actually hit stop again, it shakes the camera. The best place for it really is the shutter button, but unfortunately, like I've talked about before, for some reason Sony's just not giving that to us. So the best one, and I've tried this on a lot of different buttons. I tried C3, I tried C1, I tried C2, and C2, I'll bring this down right here. C2 I found to be the best location for the record button, so I've remapped it. So let's go back to the menu. Hit the menu button. We're going to go to the custom key settings, go to custom button 2, and as you can see, I've selected movie. All right, right here is your front dial, and this changes your aperture. And again, we're going to get more into exposure later, but it also does the same exact thing like the rear dial. It'll help you navigate around the menus, and it'll also change the position of the box up and down, actually, the zoom in box, which I've assigned to C1. All right, right here is your FN button, and right next to it is a little arrow going into a smartphone. So let's cover the playback feature first. So if we hit play, and then I hit the FN button, or this one that says send to smartphone. So you can send this image, lots of different images. We're going to talk more about stuff in the Wi-Fi chapter and the apps chapter. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but basically it's an easy or quick way to send an image from the camera to your smartphone. So in shooting mode, if we hit the FN button, which stands for function, you're going to notice that mine is set up a lot differently than probably yours. The first one is grayed out, and it's drive mode because we're actually in the movie mode on the dial, and we'll get to the dial here in a minute. But this is basically drive mode. So if I want to do sports, I can change it to a burst mode. But for video, we don't have to really worry about that. Next one, I set this up so these are most items that I change a lot, but are not so much needed that they have to be assigned to a C1 through C4 button. And one of the things I change a lot is the creative styles. And also right next to it is the picture profiles. We're going to be talking more about S-Log and all that stuff later. Show you lots of different examples. Also, DRO, which I'll get into later, I actually turn that on and off quite a bit. That's become kind of an interesting tool, and we'll demonstrate that more later. Next one I have assigned is focus area. So if you want to change like if you're doing autofocus for pictures, let's say, you can change the zones and where that all is, and we'll get to more of that later. Face detect. The face detect on this actually works surprisingly well, even for interviews. So if you're shooting at a very shallow depth of field like f2.8, and you want to track the person's face in the frame, there's a little box you'll see, and we'll get to this more later. I like having access to that quite quickly, so I can either turn that on or off. Peaking color. You can change the different colors. We're going to describe this later, but I like to be able, if I'm in a situation where there's lots of red, well, I might not want it on red like it is right now, so I can quickly change it. Next is the movie mode. this one, actually, I haven't really assigned it to anything. I think that's actually the way it came default. And I actually haven't changed it, and I hardly ever use that. The next one is white balance. Again, this is something I hardly ever use, and I might change this in the future, but because I have a white balance assigned to a different button on here, which we'll get to in a minute. This is their steady shot, and actually, I'm going to work over here. We'll start right here. This is steady shot on or off. I'm getting kind of ahead of myself here, but one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is a lot of times I'll need to change that quickly, and that's why I've got it right here. So you can actually go to like the focal length right here and change it. Like if I were shooting on a Canon 70-200 and you wanted to set it to 200, boom, you can change that quite quickly. So that's pretty much it for that. To change all that stuff, basically what you're going to want to do is go to the gear menu, page 7 again. This time you're going to go to function menu set. And this is where you're going to see all the different things that we just talked about on the 2 different pages. So you can set this up however you like. You could try the way I've got mine set up, maybe rewind and watch what I just told you and set your camera up that way. It's personal preference. Again, there's going to be a lot of people that like shoot weddings or corporate videos or a lot of different documentaries, and they might have whole different things that might be more important to them to get to quickly than the way I shoot. All right, next up we're going to talk about the control wheel, which I might also call the jog wheel. Now I've remapped this quite a bit, and you'll notice that a bunch of things just appeared on the screen. And I have a label maker, and it's really kind of hard. You have to cut them out and put them on. Now these are going to wear out over time, but what happens, and I've done this on my A7S that I'm filming with, after they've worn out, your muscle memory will pretty much be there and you don't need them anymore. So let me describe how I've got this set up. So the jog wheel itself, there's around here you can actually rotate it, and then the center is a set button, or I might call it a return button or an enter button, because usually you're creating a choice, a select button basically. So the first thing I want to talk about is the jog wheel itself. So if I rotate it, you're going to see that it's changing the ISO. The way it's come factory default, the ISO is over here on the right, which I've covered up with a W. I'll get to that later. So for me, I love having quick control on the dial for ISO. Like we have a dial for shutter speed and a dial for aperture. All these things that are exposure related, I like to be able to get to it very quickly. So that's that. On the top, I haven't remapped that at all. This is the display, and you can cycle through all the different display options. So you've got lots of information. Then you can go to minimal, and then you get your histogram, and then you also get a leveler kind of meter that goes across here as well. Next up, over on the left-hand side, the Z mode is for zebras. We're going to talk about exposure later. But a lot of times what will happen is you're looking through the viewfinder, you're looking at the display, and you've got peaking and zebras being used for focus assist and exposure assist. And then let's say you've got your exposure and your focus correct where you want it, and you want to start recording. Well, you want to clean all that stuff up quickly. So having this button right here, not having to deep dive into the menu to find out where it is and all that stuff, to clean the screen off of all that junk so you can actually watch the performance or whatever the talent is doing. Having this, being able to toggle this between like 100 plus or off is really great, having it right there. And P is the same way. You're going to have like peaking, like we talked about red. Being able to turn that between off and high quickly is just a great thing to have. Over here on the right hand side, I've assigned that to W, which is for, like, I would have put WB, would it probably stick over a little bit too much, but WB stands for white balance. And that's something I get to a lot as well. So I like to be able to change my white balance quite quickly right there. All right, next up is the trash can C4 button. So if you're in playback mode and you hit the trash can button, it's pretty obvious that you'll be able to delete items. It's that easy. If you go to shooting mode and I hit the C4 button, which is the same thing as the trash can button basically, you'll notice that I've got this assigned to audio record level. I like to be able to switch between different levels quite quickly, and this gets me there. Just to let you know, if you go all the way down to 0, no audio will be going into the unit at all. It'll be totally quiet. If you go to 1, you'll basically have the minimum amount of gain happening. So right now, just to use an example, this Rode ViewMic Pro is being plugged into my A7S It probably has the same exact circuitry as this camera, I'm guessing, in terms of audio. And if I'm quiet, you'll hear that it's actually quite quiet, because that's the way I have it set up right now. It's on the 1 position. So basically the microphone's doing most of the work because it's an extremely hot microphone. And the preamp inside the A7S, or this camera for that matter, if you turn all the way down, you can actually get pretty good results. And then when I usually use the internal microphones, the stereo microphones that are mounted on the camera itself, I'll usually set it to about 20. And that works pretty well for just getting scratch audio or something to sync up in post. Right here, this tiny little thing is your lamp access light. You'll actually be able to see a little bit better once I hit record. You can see it flashing. So basically what's happening is the image is coming off the sensor, it's going through some sort of buffer, and then it's being written to the card. And basically what you see here is either it's writing or reading from the card when you see that flashing. So basically there's 3 things you don't want to do while it's flashing. You don't want to pull the SD card, you don't want to pull the battery, or you don't want to turn it off. There's possibility that you could get corrupt a file because it doesn't close properly. And sometimes you'll get, Sony's pretty good about recovering databases. And so you might see an error message coming up saying, hey, something happened to it. Would you like to correct the database? And it'll close the file for you and it'll work fine. Sometimes it doesn't. Right here is the play button. We've already kind of used it, so you guys know what it does. Basically it play in the playback mode and you can view images and all sorts of stuff. So that's basically all it does. If you hit it again, it gets you back into shooting mode. This circle with a line through it is your image sensor location. So basically indicating where your image sensor is in the camera. So if you needed to get like a measuring tape and your minimum focal distance says 40 centimeters or 1.3 feet or something like that, you'd put it there and you'd know exactly where you're focusing to or how close you could get it to the lens, basically. Right now I'm on autofocus mode. If I put my hand right in front of it and I try to autofocus, nothing happens. But I pull my hand away, you'll hear a beep. So it's focusing, I don't know, 6 feet away where my window is. I don't know. I don't know exactly, I don't have centimeters on here. 1.3 feet, that would be like 1 foot 4 inches maybe, something like that. So about right here. And I'll put my hand out. I don't know, I could go to about right here for this particular lens. And that's a little bit less than 1.3 feet. It's about maybe 12 inches. So I don't understand it. Maybe if you zoom, it might be slightly different, but it kind of gives you in the ballpark. I've never really used these numbers before, but that's what it's there for. I think you can make this out, but there's 2 holes right here, and that's where your speaker is located. I believe there's only 1, even though there's 2 holes. So the only thing that really kind of worries me about this, out of all the camera, when water does bead up on your camera, maybe it's misting out or whatever, and water's starting to go, I got to think water goes down inside that hole. And I don't know what's protecting it to getting down into the actual circuit board, if it's really well sealed, or maybe you have to turn it upside down and shake the water out of it. I'm not too sure, but we're going to cover how to control the volume of the speaker later. We have red and green and little tiny icons that are really hard to read. Red is your microphone input and green is your headphone input. So you got 2 slots over here. This one right here is your multi connector input. This would be like your USB, or you can actually power the camera. So like I suggested before, you probably don't want to transfer files from USB to your computer. It goes kind of slow. But you can also use it if you plug this through the adapter to a wall outlet. You can actually power the camera. And there's a little tiny LED, which I believe I've already shown you, between these 2 that'll go amber, and it indicates that you're charging the camera. This right here is your HDMI. So you can take this very small HDMI connector, run it to like a Atomos Shogun, and I'm actually doing that right now from my A7S and going to the Shogun, and I can actually record on the Shogun and surpass the 30-minute limit. So basically on these cameras, the Sony cameras won't let you go past 29 minutes and 50 seconds, I believe. So basically just less than 30 minutes. So if you want to get around it, you can do that. There's like 3 other companies that make, or maybe 2 other companies make 4K recorders right now. There's Convergence Design. There's, I think, Sound Devices. There's a new Pixie that came out. I haven't tried it yet. And then this one, the Shogun. And I believe there's another version of this which is cheaper because this is very expensive. I think it's called the Assassin, which you can get for a lot cheaper. All right, right here is your hot shoe, cold shoe, depending on how you use it. Cold shoe if you like using a dumb device like an LED. Actually, there's Sony does make a more intelligent LED that you can mount on here that interfaces with the camera somehow. I haven't reviewed it, so I don't know exactly how it works. But the big thing with this hot shoe, cold shoe is there's a lot of pin contacts right here. So if it's raining or something like that, you want to put that protective cover over it. But you can also use a couple of their own microphones, which are kind of interesting. One of them has a whole entire system that has 2 XLR inputs, preamps built right into a shotgun microphone. So if you wanted to, you could have a very long XLR connector running hundreds of feet without getting any sort of interference. Nice balanced input goes right to that unit. Unfortunately, I found that unit to be somewhat noisy, and I'll demonstrate that more later. But you can also use a lavalier belt pack type system. It's small, it looks like a belt pack. You can just shove it right in there. No wires going into the mic input. It's really simple. All right, here is our mode dial. So believe it or not, you can actually shoot video in every single one of these modes, including pano. That's the symbol for pano. I don't know why, because that's usually associated with pictures, but you can actually hit the record button and it'll start recording, which is odd. So real quickly, I'm just gonna go through these and we're gonna cover these a little bit more later. This is scene, this is auto, program, aperture priority, shutter priority, manual, and this is memory number 1, memory number 2. And usually with one of these, like memory 1, I'll set this up for slow motion so I can quickly go between slow motion and regular motion quite quickly between the two, and we'll get to that more later. And obviously got your movie mode. For what we're going to be doing mostly, we're going to be either toggling between movie mode or M. And when you turn this dial, unfortunately, this is annoying to me, you have to press the center button to make this little release button to make it go, which is really annoying. C1 button, C2 button. C2 button we've already talked about. I've already programmed that to be my movie record button. C1 button, I've left this default. I haven't changed it. What's great about this button is you can punch it once, maybe twice, and it'll, at that point, zoom in on your image, and then you can adjust your focus. What's great about this camera is you can actually zoom in while you're recording, which is something you couldn't do on like the Canon cameras or this GH4 I'm filming with overhead. So that's a fantastic feature to have. All right, this dial right here is your exposure compensation, and you could use this. This is more used for stills, but if you really wanted to, you could go to, like, let's say aperture priority, hit record, and then you could adjust your exposure from this dial, which I don't really recommend doing that. All right, on either side is your neck strap holder holes, and I remember I've talked about these little guys. I don't know what their proper name is, but I've taken them off because they kind of jingle and they make noise on the side of the camera, and I just didn't want to get that into the microphone. So basically took them off, and I don't use a neck strap that way. All right, this N that you see right here, that stands for NFC. So if you were to take a Android phone and place it right up against the camera, it'll automatically launch the app and transfer a photo from the camera to your Android device. From what I understand, I can't try this because I don't have any Android devices. I have an iPhone, which I believe has NFC, but I think it's only set up for Apple Pay right now, and they haven't let other vendors like Sony use that part of the phone yet. So I can't really demonstrate that, unfortunately. One thing I will say, in the manual it talks about not putting metal right next to here, which makes me a little curious because I don't use metal cages, but if you have a metal cage and you put it around there and you've got this set up in the menu so NFC is working, maybe it might screw things up. I'm not too sure. This is your 1/4 thread to mount like quick release plates, or you can mount it right to a light stand if you wanted to, basically. I use the Manfrotto style plates. This is actually not one of them. I bought a Benro. I guess it's a knockoff maybe, but it fits great in any of the fluid heads like this. Now, when I was first starting, I was kind of confused because there's 2 different thread sizes when it comes to photography. There's the 1/4, and this plate mounts is right to here. But then there's a second one. So when you're ordering things, just so you guys know, real quick, there's a much larger thread right here, and that's usually where your tripod meets like a fluid head, and that's your other size. So just want to be aware that when you're ordering things, you want to, if you're looking for quick release plates, you want a 1/4. All right, this is your battery compartment door. Seems pretty obvious, but something you might have missed right here is this little cable pass through. So you can put like a dummy battery in. It'll help power the camera, plugged into the wall so it's always on. and use this as your pass-through. I almost recommend not getting that type of device because you can just take your USB, connect it right to the wall, and you wouldn't have to buy the accessory because you can already do it the way it's set up, powering it off of USB. So that's pretty much the battery compartment door, and that's the end of the tour around the camera.